Thank you, Mr. President, for convening this debate. Timor-Leste aligns itself with the statement of G77 plus China. Mr. President, the use of unilateral extraterritorial coercive measures is a controversial topic, with both advocates and critics presenting valid arguments. However, amidst this debate, over 30 countries are denied access to fundamental rights due to these measures, which violates the UN Charter, various UN resolutions, and the principle of multilateralism. This highlights the urgent need for a reevaluation of UECM, as they contradict the principles of international cooperation and respect for sovereignty, causing harm to innocent populations and undermining global stability. It is essential to explore alternative solutions that prioritize dialogue, diplomacy, and human rights, ensuring that all nations can access basic rights and participate equally in the global community. Mr. President, Timor-Leste understands that the removal of economic sanctions, trade restrictions, and other measures imposed by the one country on another without the consent of the targeted country is a must. These measures, as we have heard from the previous speakers, are often used as a means of political and economic pressure, but can have devastating consequences for the targeted countries, including economic hardship and instability, disruption of global supply chains, violation of sovereignty and international law, discrimination against certain countries or industries, hindrance to economic development and cooperation. As we all know, the practice of coercive measures was introduced and imposed primarily by big and powerful nations over smaller and economically weaker states, and can take many forms, including economic sanctions, trade embargoes, asset freezes, investment restrictions, travel bans, and other forms of coercive measures on target nations, such as the case of Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and others. These countries mentioned above, along with other targeted countries, have seen the worst of economic hardship and political instability. Worse still, the eventual bearing of these measures are the innocent population, mostly the vulnerable groups, the elderly women, and the youth. Mr. President, unilateral extraterritorial coercive economic measures should find no place in our world today. It violates sovereignty and international law, undermining the principles of equality and non-interference. They violate the UN Charters, human rights principles, and International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, as well as Convention on Social and Economic Rights. The humanitarian impact is significant, as I said before, with innocent civilians bearing the brunt of these measures. It hinders economic development and cooperation. It restricts access to markets, technology, and resources. They limit the potential for economic growth and diversification. This perpetuates economic inequality and dependence, undermining the achievement of sustainable development goals. The application of coercive measures, as we have seen thus far, are employed as a means of political coercion rather than a legitimate response to political or economic concerns. This undermines the rule of law and perpetuates a culture of might makes right, rather than encouraging diplomacy, solutions, and dialogue. Coercive measures can also lead to retaliation from affected parties, escalate tensions, and potentially spark trade wars. To this end, Timor-Leste pushes for the full implementation of UN resolutions on the elimination of unilateral economic coercive measures for all targeted countries, including Cuba and Venezuela, as it would foster a more just and equitable economic system, promoting multilateralism and cooperation. Timor-Leste believes that the abolishment of such sanctions would encourage economic diplomacy, negotiation, and the development of alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, avoid trade wars, and ultimately leading to a more peaceful and prosperous world. It will thus help countries to achieve SDGs and leave no one behind. I thank you.